Let's look at examples of CSS properties. We have position properties and we have visual properties. So on the left side we have the positioning properties such as float, clear, position, padding, margin, and so forth. And on the right side we have the visual properties like font size, font weight, font family, color, text decoration, and so on. So this is an example on the right side. If we have in HTML a UL, for example, an unordered list that contains 5 list items, LIs. The LIs have the same class, which happens to have a value styling list, and the word that's supposed to be for the first is about us, product, services, research, contact us. Now when you look at this, it looks like, what is this? Until we unveil what's about to come. Before we do that, let's read the CSS. So if we have this HTML and this CSS, basically representing the LI, so the LI whose class is styling list, the LI whose class is styling list, we want that LI to float left. We want it to have a padding of 5 pixels and 0. We want it to have a width of 120 pixels, a background color. This is a fuchsia, dark fuchsia color. We want it to have bordered left, list style type none, text align center. We'll explain what each of those are step by step eventually, but let's just unveil visually how this will look. Before doing that, these underlines are basically showing that these are the positioning properties we used in the CSS, and these are the visual properties we used in the CSS. And so this is what we get. So in other words, what is this? This is a navigation menu. If we want to create a navigation menu that looks like this, that has a dark fuchsia background, that is using this is, I believe, Verdana font, that has a dotted border on the left side, that has some padding around the words, that where the words are centered within the LI, then this is what we have to write in HTML, and this is the CSS. So one thing to note here is that the 5 LIs, so each of these rectangles are the LIs. This is one LI, this is another LI, this is the third, fourth, and fifth, okay? Each of these LIs have the same class because we want all of them to look alike. We want all of them to be dark fuchsia, Verdana font, left side border, which is dotted and white, words centered on within the LI, the width of the LI is 120 pixels, and so on. So we want the 5 of them to look alike. We don't want the second one to be purple, the third one to be green, the fourth one to be, and so on. And that's exactly why we use the same class value, because later in CSS we are saying the list whose class is styling list, or the list whose class is that value that is shared among other LI items. We want these lists to float left, to have a padding of a certain value, to be 120 pixel wide, to have this particular background color, to have a border left that is dotted and white, to have no bullet on the left side. We'll explain what list style type none is later on. We want the text to be aligned, and so on. I skipped it explaining float, padding, and so on, because float is a complete whole lecture for another time. But you know, each one of these properties we will cover individually as we when the time comes, as we go on. Centering inline and block level elements. In the previous example, we used text align to center each word within the 120 pixel list width. So this is what we had, and we used the text align center property in order to align every word within the 120 pixel width of the LI. Text align applies on block containers containing inline level content. So what you see here is the rule, okay? So remember that li is a block element, and the property text align is used on block elements, so on elements such as the li, containing inline level content in order to center them. Here the block container is li, to which we apply text align center to center text, which is basically inline level content within the block li. Text align could also apply on a div, for example, which is a block element containing an image which is inline. You see, so this rule, text align, applies on block elements containing inline level content, applies on other elements too, not only the li with the words. So a div containing an image, a p containing text, th, which is the table header cell containing words, and so on. Other text align values besides center are left, justify, and right. Block level elements, however, do not understand text align. In order to center them, we use the property margin 0 auto on block element itself and not on its parent. Let's look at this example. Let's pretend we have a div whose ID is container. So think of the div as a box, and it's a transparent thin line that contains nothing unless it has a width, a height, and a background color, which is this case. If it doesn't, then we don't see the div. So there's a div whose ID is container. It is 700 pixels wide and 700 pixels high. It has this, again, that dark fuchsia color, and we are applying the margin 0 auto property to the div. Let's see what happens. This is the result we get. We're obviously pretending we have a background that is light gray, and there's this other rococo pattern being repeated in the background in gray. But what we're interested in this example is this fuchsia box. Okay, this is the div pound container. We told the div pound container to be 700 pixels wide by 700 pixels high. We told it to have this fuchsia color, which is FF0099 according to the hexadecimal chart. We also told it to be centered on the page. So we use the margin 0 auto property. What about word spacing? Word spacing is applied on all elements, whether block and inline, and it specifies the spacing behavior between words and other inline level content, such as images. So if we have an example like div, whose ID is blue box, div pound blue box, it has a width of 500 pixels, a height of 300 pixels, a turquoise blue, this is a turquoise blue 33CCCC, is a turquoise blue color, padding 20 pixels, and word spacing 15 pixels. This is what we get. So this turquoise blue is the div, whose ID is blue box. It is 500 pixels wide, 300 pixels high. This is the color, 33CCCC. There's a padding of 20 pixels. So when we say padding 20 pixels, it means within the div, there is space all around, on the top, on the right, on the bottom, and on the left, a space of 20 pixels. We call that padding. And then we use the word spacing property just in order to create the space between these two images. Now, granted, images, they line up horizontally, so they will be next to each other anyway. And they do have a space in between because that's how inline elements behave. They line up next to one another and they leave a slight space in between, but not as much. So what we did in this case is we applied word spacing 15 pixels to add more space than that was created by the two images themselves. Text align and word spacing are examples of inherited styling attributes, which means if a parent has this property, the child inherits it. Example, if a P with word spacing nests a span without, the span inherits the word spacing styling attribute of P, of paragraph. Let's look at examples of properties that come in shorthand. The font, for example. Using the body element, which is the entire page, we can say font, bold, italic, 12 pixels, Arial, Helvetica, sans serif, or we can say body, font weight bold, font style italic, font size 12 pixels, font family Arial, Helvetica, sans serif. As beginners, we might want to use this method, but when we get used to writing HTML and CSS, we want to write much quicker, and so we end up writing in shorthand. They both do the same thing. This just takes more time to type, and this is, much easier and less time consuming. The reason we have Arial, Helvetica, and sans serif is because we're basically telling the computer, I want to display the Arial font. If you don't have that font, which between brackets is unlikely, because all computers, Macs and PCs, do have Arial. But basically we're saying, if you don't have Arial, then display Helvetica. If you don't have Helvetica, then display the first sans serif font that you have available in the memory of the computer. Another example of properties that can come in shorthand, background. So again, using the body element, we're basically saying that we want the body to have a background color of black. 000000 is black, represents the color black, and for all colors we use a pound sign before. So we want the background to be black. We want, we're calling an image that is called smile.jpg, and we're saying no repeat. So on a black background, we are inserting an image which will end up sitting in the top left corner of the screen on its own, because we're saying no repeat. Had we said repeat, or had we repeat X, repeat Y, I'll discuss those later, but had we not mentioned no repeat, you would see that smiley face create a pattern throughout the whole page. But we said no repeat, so it just sits there on the top left corner. Anyway, what we're discussing here is the topic of shorthand. So we can write this property on one line or in 3 lines by saying background color black, background image, and we call the URL, and background repeat, no repeat. Border. We can say div pound container, the border is 3 pixels solid green, or border width 3 pixels, border style solid, border color green. List style. li.styling_list, we can say list style circle outside, or list style type circle, list style position outside. What this is doing basically is, so remember we have the UL and the OL elements, the unordered list and the ordered list. When we open a UL or an OL, they have the LI child by all means. So the LI child, if it were the child of the OL, you would see 1, 2, 3 displayed on the browser. If the LI is the child of the UL, you would see a bullet point. If you want that bullet point replaced by something else, or you want it deleted, you would use these properties. So let's say you want that bullet point replaced by a square. You would say list style square outside. If you wanted a circle, you would say circle outside. If you want the bullet to be removed entirely, you would say list style type none, and so on.